There are moments in life that arrive without announcement. You are not seeking them, you are not prepared for them, you are simply there, sitting in silence, reading, driving, lying awake as the day finally loosens its grip on your thoughts, and then, without warning, a sharp, clean ringing cuts through your right ear. It isn't loud, yet it demands attention. It doesn't belong to the room. There is no phone vibrating, no appliance humming, just a thin, piercing frequency that feels strangely internal yet not entirely yours. Your first reaction is almost automatic. You tilt your head, you rub your ear, you blink and look around as if the sound might reveal itself if you catch it in the act. Most people dismiss it within seconds. Stress, you think, fatigue, too much screen time, blood pressure, headphones from earlier in the day. The mind rushes to normalize it, to label it, to make it small enough to ignore. And usually just as suddenly as it appeared, the ringing fades. Silence returns. Life continues. But something about it lingers. Because if you are honest with yourself, the strange part was never the sound itself. The strange part was when it came. Why did it arrive in that exact moment? When your mind was drifting, when your heart was heavy, when your thoughts were circling something unresolved? Why does it so often appear during stillness, not noise? During pauses, not distractions? During moments when no one else is watching and nothing else is happening? These are the questions most people never ask. Not because they lack intelligence, but because modern life trains us to move past moments instead of listening to them. We are taught that meaning belongs to big events, births, deaths, successes, losses, not to small interruptions that last only a few seconds. And yet some of the most important reminders in life do not arrive with drama. They arrive quietly, briefly, almost politely. In the Sufi tradition, especially in the teachings attributed to Ibn Arabi, the world is not divided into important moments and meaningless ones. Everything that reaches you does so by permission. Not everything is a message, but nothing is entirely empty either. The difference lies not in the event itself, but in the state of the one experiencing it. This is why the ringing in the right ear unsettles people, not because it hurts, not because it is frightening, but because it interrupts the illusion that everything is random. You may have noticed this yourself. The ringing often appears when you are thinking deeply about something, about your future, your fears, your regrets, your unanswered prayers. It arrives when your mind is loud and your surroundings are quiet, almost as if something cuts through the noise to remind you that you are not only a body moving through time, but a heart moving through meaning. Of course, the physical explanations exist. The body has mechanisms. The nervous system has limits. Islam has never asked you to deny the physical world. But Ibn Arabi invites you to look behind the mechanism, not just at it. To ask not only how something happens, but why it reaches you when it does. Because timing is never neutral. Two people can experience the same sensation, yet only one of them feels paused by it. Only one of them feels as if the moment asked for attention. The other shakes it off and moves on. The difference is not in the ear, it is in awareness. So the question is not whether the ringing is real or imagined. You heard it. It happened. The real question is simpler and far more uncomfortable. What if this moment was not meant to be dismissed? What if it was not asking you to diagnose your body, but to notice your state? And if that is the case, then the next question naturally follows. If this sound is not just noise, what is it calling you back to? To understand moments like this, Ibn Arabi asks us to change the way we look at life itself. Not dramatically, not by abandoning reason or rejecting the physical world, but by widening the frame just enough to see what usually goes unnoticed. Most people are taught to experience the world as a collection of isolated events. One thing happens, then another. Causes are physical. Meanings are assigned later, if at all. Life, in this view, is mostly accidental, something you react to, manage, and survive. But Ibn Arabi did not see the world that way. For him, existence was not a series of random occurrences. It was a continuous conversation, not a conversation made of words, but of moments, interruptions, patterns, and responses. The universe, in his understanding, was not silent. It was speaking constantly, just not always in a language the distracted heart could hear. This is why he often emphasized that nothing arrives without purpose, even when that purpose is hidden, especially when it is hidden. What we call coincidence, he called alignment. What we call interruption, he saw as instruction. From this perspective, the physical world is not opposed to the spiritual world. It is the surface through which deeper meanings pass. Just as a letter must be written on paper to be read, meaning must pass through form to reach you. Sensations, events, delays, and disruptions are simply the ink. This is where many misunderstand Sufi wisdom. They imagine it dismisses the material world, as if spirituality exists only in retreat and silence. Ibn Arabi taught the opposite. He taught that the ordinary world is the classroom, that guidance does not wait for mystical visions or dramatic signs. It appears in what repeats, what interrupts, what unsettles you just enough to make you pause. In this view, the human being is not only a body responding to stimuli. You are also awareness, memory, and responsiveness. Your body receives information, but your heart decides whether it will be treated as noise or as meaning. So when something like the ringing in the right ear occurs, Ibn Arabi would not rush to deny its physical explanation. He would ask a different question entirely. Why did this sensation reach this person at this moment? What inner state did it interrupt? What attention did it redirect? Because in his teaching, events are not evaluated by their size, but by their effect. A whisper that makes you stop can be more significant than a shout you ignore. He also warned against living as if reality were mute. When a person assumes that nothing carries meaning, the heart slowly dulls. Life becomes flat. Prayer becomes mechanical. Reflection becomes rare, not because God is distant, but because the human being has trained themselves not to listen. This is why the concept of signs is so central in Islamic spirituality. A sign is not something magical. It is something ordinary that points beyond itself. A road sign does not need to be beautiful or dramatic to be useful. It only needs to be noticed. The ringing in the ear, seen through this lens, is not automatically a message, but it is also not automatically meaningless. It is an interruption that qualifies for reflection. A moment that asks quietly, are you present right now? Are you aware of what is happening inside you? Ibn Arabi often spoke about the danger of reducing life to habit. When everything is habit, nothing teaches you anymore. You move, speak, react, and pray without awareness. Signs lose their power not because they stop appearing, but because the heart stops responding. And this is where the teaching becomes personal. If you have experienced this ringing more than once, it is worth asking, not in fear and not in superstition, but in honesty, what was happening within me when it appeared? What thought was interrupted? What emotion was exposed? What inner direction was quietly corrected? Because in the Sufi understanding, meaning does not chase you. It waits for you to slow down enough to meet it. And if the world truly speaks in signs, then the next question becomes unavoidable. Why does this reminder arrive as a sound and not as words? Not everything that matters in life arrives in the form of language. You already know this, even if you've never thought about it consciously. Grief doesn't introduce itself with a sentence. Anxiety doesn't knock politely and explain why it's here. Peace doesn't announce itself either. It simply settles, and you recognize it only after it arrives. The human being understands far more than what can be put into words. Ibn Arabi understood this deeply. He taught that meaning exists before language, and that language is often the last and weakest container for truth. Some realities are too subtle, too layered, or too immediate to pass through speech. When they reach us, they do so in forms the body can register even when the mind cannot yet interpret them. This is why reminders often arrive as sensations. A tight chest, a sudden stillness, a heaviness that makes you stop mid-sentence, or in this case, a thin, high-pitched ringing that cuts cleanly through silence. It is not trying to tell you a story. It is not offering an explanation. It is simply interrupting your momentum. Think of it like a notification without text. You don't yet know the message, but you know something has arrived. Modern life trains us to distrust these moments. We are taught that if something cannot be measured or explained immediately, it should be dismissed. And yes, the body has mechanisms. Nerves fire, signals misfire. Biology plays its role. Ibn Arabi never denied this, but he insisted that mechanisms do not cancel meaning. They are the path through which meaning travels. Imagine trying to send a complex image through a narrow channel. The data has to be compressed. Details are lost. What arrives is simplified, reduced to color, shape, or vibration. In the same way, when a subtle reminder passes through the density of the physical body, it cannot always arrive as understanding. It arrives as sensation. A sound is one of the simplest forms of interruption. It demands attention without explanation. It does not argue with you. It does not ask permission. It simply appears, cuts through your thoughts, and disappears. This is what makes it effective. The ringing in the right ear has no external source. You cannot point to it. You cannot locate it in the room. It forces you inward, even if only for a second. And in that second, your awareness shifts from the story in your head to the moment you are actually in. This is not an accident of design. In Sufi thought, the human being lives on multiple levels at once. The body moves through space. The mind moves through thought. And the heart moves through attention. Most of the time, these layers are out of alignment. Your body may be sitting still while your mind is racing ahead or looping backward. An interruption like this briefly realigns them. The sound arrives, thought pauses, the body becomes still, the present moment takes over. As for why it is often reported in the right ear, Ibn Arabi and those influenced by his symbolic language would not rush to literal conclusions. Instead, they would note a pattern. Across many spiritual traditions, the right side is associated with clarity, intention, and uprightness, not as superstition, but as a way humans organize meaning. Just as we associate light with understanding and darkness with confusion, certain directions and sides become symbolic containers. The point is not the ear itself. The point is orientation. This sound does not pull you outward. It does not distract you further. It does the opposite. It turns you back toward awareness, toward the inner state you were inhabiting just moments before it appeared. And this raises a more important question than what caused the sound. What state did it interrupt? Because if meaning arrives as sensation before understanding, then the ringing is not asking you to analyze it immediately. It is asking you to notice yourself. And once you begin to notice that, another layer begins to emerge. Sometimes the sound is not only calling you into the present. Sometimes it is calling you back into alignment. If there is one thing modern life quietly steals from us, it is presence. Not our time, our attention. Days pass, conversations happen, prayers are offered, but the heart is often elsewhere, thinking ahead, replaying the past, carrying worries that haven't arrived yet or regrets that cannot be changed. This drifting becomes so normal that we stop noticing it. You can be physically present in a room while mentally living somewhere else entirely. Your body moves through routines while your awareness runs on habit. And from the outside, everything looks fine. But inwardly, something is missing. This is where small interruptions matter. In Ibn Arabi's understanding, reminders do not come to punish the wandering heart. They come to gather it, to call it back gently before it strays too far. Not all reminders are dramatic. Many are subtle enough that only a listening heart will pause for them. The ringing in the right ear often arrives in these moments of quiet drift. You may be sitting alone, doing nothing in particular, yet thinking about everything at once. The mind cycles through unfinished conversations, unresolved fears, unspoken hopes, and then the sound appears clean, sharp, unmistakable. For a brief moment, your thoughts stop. You are pulled out of your internal noise and placed back into the present. This is why the ringing feels intrusive but not hostile. It doesn't carry panic, it carries interruption. Presence is not something you force. It is something you return to, again and again. And the path back is rarely grand. It is usually marked by moments that break your trance. Ibn Arabi taught that the heart is constantly being invited back to awareness. When those invitations are ignored, life grows dull, prayer feels dry, gratitude weakens, even joy loses its sharpness, not because the world has changed, but because the heart has stopped arriving fully. From this perspective, the ringing is not an anomaly. It is a pause inserted into the flow of distraction, a moment where the inner world is briefly quieted, allowing something deeper to surface. Think about what happens when the sound appears. You stop whatever you are doing. You listen. Even if you don't understand it, you give it your attention. In that moment, you are no longer lost in thought. You are present. That alone is significant. In Sufi wisdom, presence is not a minor virtue. It is the foundation of all others. Without presence, patience is mechanical. Gratitude is hollow. Trust becomes a slogan rather than a lived reality. Presence is the doorway through which all spiritual qualities pass. So when something disrupts your mental momentum and brings you fully into the moment, it deserves respect. This is why Ibn Arabi emphasized awareness over interpretation. Before you ask what a sign means, you must notice what it does. And what this ringing often does is simple but powerful. It gathers your scattered attention and returns it to you. Many people miss this because they rush to make the sound stop. They treat it like a glitch to be corrected rather than a moment to be entered. But if you allow it, if you don't fight it, you may notice something subtle shift inside you. A slowing, a softening, a brief stillness. That stillness is not empty. It is the space where awareness returns. And once presence is restored, something else becomes possible. Because when you are fully present, you can finally see the state of your heart clearly. This leads to the second layer of meaning, one that is quieter but far more revealing. Sometimes, the ringing does not just call you into the moment. Sometimes, it shows you what the moment has been missing. Once presence returns, something else follows naturally, awareness of state. Not judgment, not fear, just recognition. The heart, when it is fully present, begins to see itself. Ibn Arabi taught that one of the greatest veils between a person and truth is not sin, but heedlessness. The slow drifting away from awareness. The kind that feels normal because it is quiet and gradual. You are not doing anything dramatically wrong. You are simply not paying attention anymore. This is why some reminders arrive as interruptions rather than instructions. When the ringing in the right ear appears, it often does so at moments when the heart is tilted, subtly but noticeably. You may not realize it until the interruption exposes it. Perhaps your thoughts were looping in anxiety. Perhaps you were replaying a resentment. Perhaps you were about to speak words that would harden rather than heal. Or perhaps your prayer had become rushed, more habit than presence. The sound does not accuse you of any of this. It simply stops you long enough for you to notice. This is what makes it an audit rather than a warning. An audit is not a punishment. It is a check, a moment where you look at the numbers before they grow into a problem. In the same way, this interruption invites you to glance inward before drift turns into distance. Sufi teachers often describe the heart as something that requires regular polishing. Not because it is broken, but because it collects residue from daily life. Worry, comparison, distraction, pride, disappointment. None of these arrive all at once. They settle slowly, layer by layer, until clarity fades. A sudden interruption like this can function as a cloth passed gently over the surface. You might notice in the seconds after the ringing begins a brief discomfort, not in the ear but in awareness. A question rises uninvited. Where am I right now? What am I feeding inwardly? This is not meant to induce guilt. Guilt locks the heart. Awareness opens it. Ibn Arabi emphasized that the purpose of noticing your state is not to condemn it, but to redirect it. A heart that recognizes its drift can return. A heart that remains unaware continues moving further away without resistance. This is why some people experience the ringing more often during periods of inner unrest, not because something is wrong with them, but because something is being gently corrected. When the inner world grows noisy, interruptions become necessary. Imagine driving slightly off course. The road does not collapse, the car does not stop, but eventually a vibration in the steering wheel tells you something needs adjustment. You don't panic, you correct the wheel. The ringing can function in a similar way. It asks nothing dramatic of you. It does not demand answers or explanations. It simply creates a pause long enough for you to straighten your inner direction. And this is where many people misunderstand the experience. They either ignore it completely or inflate it into something mystical and frightening. Both responses miss the point. The sign is neither to be dismissed nor dramatized. It is to be met. When met correctly, it cultivates a powerful habit, self-awareness without harshness. Over time, this changes the way you move through life. You begin to notice your state before it fully takes over. You catch resentment before it settles. You catch worry before it becomes panic. You catch distraction before it turns into emptiness. This is how spiritual growth often works, not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through repeated small returns. And once you understand this, the question naturally becomes practical. If this interruption is a call to presence and a quiet audit of the heart, how should you respond when it happens? Not in theory, not in ideal conditions, but right there, in the middle of ordinary life. Meaning becomes easier to recognize when it is grounded in life as it is actually lived, not in theories, not in abstractions, but in moments that feel familiar enough that you can see yourself inside them. Consider the first moment. Someone is lying awake at night. The room is dark. The phone has been set aside, but the mind refuses to follow. Thoughts circle around the same worry, money, health, a decision that must be made soon but doesn't yet have an answer. The body is still, yet the heart feels restless. The future is being rehearsed again and again, each time with a slightly darker ending. And then in the quiet, the ringing appears. Not loud, not alarming, just enough to interrupt the spiral. For a second, the thoughts pause. The person exhales without realizing they were holding their breath. They don't analyze the sound. They don't reach for an explanation. They simply lie there present. A short remembrance slips out almost instinctively, not as a ritual but as relief. The worry doesn't disappear, but it loosens. Sleep arrives later, softer than before. And in the morning, the problem remains, but the grip it had on the heart has weakened. Nothing dramatic changed, but something important shifted. Now consider a second moment. A message appears on a screen, a familiar name, a sentence that triggers irritation, the kind that invites a sharp response, something clever, something cutting. The fingers hover over the keyboard. The heart leans forward, ready to defend itself. And then the ringing cuts in. Just for a moment. Enough to pause the movement. Enough to create space. In that space, something subtle happens. The person sees the reaction forming before it becomes action. They recognize the familiar pull toward ego, toward escalation. The message remains on the screen unanswered. The response is delayed, not out of fear but awareness. Later, when the reply is finally sent, it carries restraint instead of fire. The conversation ends without damage. No one will ever know how close it came to becoming something heavier, but the heart knows, and that is enough. The interruption did not remove the temptation. It exposed it early. Now consider a third moment. Someone is moving through their day on autopilot. Not sad, not joyful, just flat. Prayers are performed but without warmth. Gratitude feels distant. The world looks the same as it always does, yet something feels dull. The person begins to wonder quietly when faith started to feel like obligation instead of connection. And then, while doing something entirely ordinary, washing dishes, walking to the car, standing in line, the ringing appears. It feels out of place, almost awkward. The person stops what they are doing, confused for a second, and then something unexpected happens. A memory surfaces, not a dramatic one, just a simple remembrance of earlier sincerity, of a time when awareness felt closer, not because life was easier, but because attention was fuller. The moment passes, the sound fades, the dishes still need to be washed, but something has been reawakened. Not excitement, not certainty, just openness, a quiet willingness to return. These moments are not rare, they are common, so common that they are often overlooked. What connects them is not the sound itself, but what follows it. In each case, the interruption creates a gap, and in that gap, choice appears, not a loud choice, a subtle one. Do you continue as you were? Or do you return, slightly, gently, imperfectly, to awareness? Ibn Arabi taught that life responds to the one who responds, not with rewards or punishments, but with increased clarity. When a person begins to notice these small openings and steps into them, the heart becomes more sensitive, not fragile, but receptive. The ringing in this light is not the lesson, it is the doorway. The lesson is what you do when the doorway opens. And this brings us to the most practical question of all, because awareness without response fades quickly. Presence without action dissolves back into habit. So when the moment comes, when the interruption arrives again, how do you meet it? Not later, not after reflection, but in the first 10 seconds. Moments like this are brief. They do not wait for perfect conditions. They arrive while you are busy, distracted, uncertain, or tired. And because they are brief, the response cannot be complicated. It has to be simple enough to live inside real life. Ibn Arabi and the people of inward awareness understood something essential. Meaning fades if it is not met. Not because the sign disappears, but because the heart slips back into habit. The interruption opens a door, but doors close if you hesitate too long. This is why the response matters more than the explanation. The first thing to do when the ringing appears is not to react, but to pause just for a moment. Stop moving. Stop adjusting your ear. Stop searching for the cause. Let the sound complete itself without resistance. In that pause, your body, mind, and heart briefly come into alignment. You are no longer scattered. You are here. This pause alone is powerful. It signals to the heart that this moment is not being ignored. The second step is remembrance, not as ritual but as orientation. A short phrase, a quiet acknowledgement, something that turns the heart upward instead of inward. Many people of remembrance simply say Allahu Akbar or Subhan Allah or even a soft Ya Allah. The words themselves are less important than what they do. They remind you that whatever is happening, inside or outside of you, exists within a larger reality. Remembrance shifts the center of gravity. Instead of obsessing over the sensation, you return to the one who sustains both the body and the meaning behind it. This prevents the moment from turning into fear or fascination. It keeps it grounded. And then comes the third movement, one rooted deeply in spiritual courtesy, sending blessings upon the Prophet letter FDFA. This is not a technical requirement. It is an act of alignment. In the Sufi understanding, the prophetic way represents balance, mercy, and clarity. By sending blessings, you are reconnecting your moment, however small, to that greater pattern. Some people also add a quiet supplication for goodness. A simple sentence, spoken sincerely, asking Allah for clarity, forgiveness, or guidance. Others make a brief prayer for anyone who may have mentioned them in goodness, known or unknown, not because they are certain of unseen conversations, but because courtesy trains the heart to respond with generosity rather than curiosity. This entire response can take less than 10 seconds. And yet, those seconds change the direction of the moment. Without a response, the ringing remains an interruption that fades into memory. With a response, it becomes a turning point, small but real. It trains the nervous system and the soul to move toward awareness instead of irritation, toward humility instead of analysis. Ibn Arabi warned against chasing signs while neglecting states. The goal is not to collect moments of meaning. It is to become the kind of person who responds well when meaning arrives. A person whose first instinct is remembrance, not dismissal. Over time, this changes you. You begin to notice the pause more quickly. The heart softens faster. The return becomes smoother, and gradually, the world itself begins to feel less hostile and more instructive, not because life becomes easier, but because you become more attentive. This is the quiet discipline behind spiritual awareness. No drama, no obsession, just a practiced return. And once you learn to respond this way to a small interruption, something else happens. You start to recognize how many other moments in your day are offering the same invitation, just without a sound. And that is where the meaning widens beyond the ear and into the way you live. Once you learn how to meet a small interruption with awareness, something subtle begins to change. Not all at once, not dramatically, but quietly in the background of daily life. The ringing in the right ear no longer stands alone. It becomes part of a larger pattern, one you begin to notice everywhere. You start to see that life is filled with these pauses, moments that arrive unannounced and ask for attention before they ask for explanation, a delay that saves you from a mistake, a sudden calm that appears in the middle of anxiety, a conversation that feels heavier than it should, inviting restraint instead of reaction. None of these moments announce themselves as signs. They don't need to. Once awareness is trained, recognition happens naturally. Ibn Arabi taught that the purpose of noticing signs is not to become obsessed with them. The goal is not to decode everything or to live in constant analysis. That kind of vigilance hardens the heart rather than opening it. The goal is much simpler, to become responsive. A responsive heart does not panic at interruption. It does not cling to certainty. It meets life with presence and humility, understanding that guidance often arrives disguised as inconvenience. This is why the people of inner knowledge were careful. They warned against turning awareness into superstition. A sign does not replace reason. It does not override responsibility. It does not free you from effort. It simply invites you to align effort with awareness. When you respond correctly, even once something shifts, you realize that meaning does not always arrive to solve your problems. Often, it arrives to change how you carry them. Anxiety may still exist. Difficult conversations may still happen. Uncertainty may still linger, but you are no longer alone inside them. The ringing becomes a reminder of that companionship, a quiet proof that attention is possible even in the smallest spaces. And over time, this practice reshapes your relationship with the ordinary. Silence no longer feels empty. Interruptions no longer feel hostile. Even discomfort carries the possibility of instruction. This is the deeper gift hidden inside a simple moment. Not the sound itself, but the awareness it awakens. Because when awareness grows, life stops feeling like something that merely happens to you. It becomes something that works with you, guiding, correcting, and returning you again and again to what matters. And with that understanding, the moment no longer needs explanation. It needs acknowledgement. And that brings us to a final reflection, one that does not belong only to this experience, but to all the quiet moments you have dismissed without listening. Not every sign arrives loudly. Not every reminder asks for your belief. Some only ask for your attention. The next time silence is broken by a sound you cannot explain, resist the urge to rush past it. Pause. Notice where your heart was leaning just before the interruption. Notice what returned when the noise faded. Have you ever experienced a small moment in your life, something easy to dismiss, that later revealed itself as a quiet invitation back to awareness? If this reflection resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Voice of Sufism, and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss future reflections on the hidden meanings woven into everyday life. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What were you doing the last time you noticed this ringing, or another quiet sign, and what did it awaken in you? More reflections will appear on screen now. Let them guide you deeper into the unseen wisdom already present in your daily life.